Thank you for sending your questions on Facebook, on Reddit, on YouTube, and sending them directly to us on other social media platforms. Here's the first question we're going to answer. What is Super Tuesday? Well, Super Tuesday was a creation in 1988 of 9 southern states that were tired of the Democratic Party nominating liberal candidates who didn't do well in the South. So they banded together to have a kind of southern primary day in an effort to have more influence. It did not really work out that year. You may remember in 1988, the Democratic nominee turned out to be Michael Dukakis of, yes, Massachusetts. But 4 years later, Super Tuesday was very helpful for Bill Clinton, then the governor of Arkansas, to win the Democratic nomination. So it did work for them, for the southern states in that contest. This year we saw a big interloper on Super Tuesday. That was California, the biggest state in the country, the one that has the most convention delegates of anybody. California has usually come at the very end of the process, the first week of June, and usually the nomination was settled by the time we got around to California. So this year, California moved up to the first state they could have. This is the first state that's open for states that are not the first 4. Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina. It's the first state. The other states can have their contest. California moved up there, but we also had some southern states, a half dozen southern states, and a couple other states like Minnesota and Maine and Vermont. And states move up to this date because they think they'll have more influence coming at the beginning of the process. So who decides when a state can hold its primary? The state decides. And that means that the South couldn't kind of protect their early Super Tuesday date. It means that states can calculate they want to go earlier, they want to go late. Sometimes the 2 parties in a state disagree about when they want to hold their primary. They have to work that out because it's up to them, not up to the DNC or any other national body. You know, you look at what southern states were trying to do in 1988. It kind of worked out this year for those more moderate southern states as well, because they threw a huge lifeline to Vice President Joe Biden, the less liberal candidate than Bernie Sanders, who describes himself as a democratic socialist.
So I'm here to report, we are very much alive!
Okay, here's a question we got on Reddit. I would say there are 2 people who could stop the Joe Biden juggernaut. One is Bernie Sanders. You know, Bernie Sanders didn't have a great Super Tuesday. On the other hand, he won California. He has millions of dollars in the bank. He has a huge network on social media that could help him raise more money whenever he needs it. He has a really devoted core of supporters. Many of them have been with him since the 2016 race that he waged against Hillary Clinton. And he's done considerable outreach to Hispanic voters. His Hispanic support definitely bigger this time than 4 years ago. So we should not count Bernie Sanders out. The second person who could end the Joe Biden juggernaut is Joe Biden. You know, Joe Biden has been a really uneven presidential candidate. Joe Biden has run for president 3 times. I've covered all 3 of his presidential campaigns, and he is often a terrible candidate. Now, he seemed to have found his footing last night. He was great in the rally that he addressed. He seemed comfortable and, of course, very happy after a good election night. He connects with voters in a personal way. But we haven't seen Joe Biden excel in most of the debates, although in the last debate he was a little better. Now, you don't want to be too certain because things take twists and turns that you don't expect, but it looks like it's a 2-person race. It looks more than likely that the Democratic nominee nominated in Milwaukee in July is going to be either Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders. And the question for either of them is going to be, can they unite the party, including the people who supported the other guy?
The truth is that the path has narrowed to a close for our candidacy, if not for our cause.
Well, for one thing, it seemed unselfish for him to do that, not to hang on to the last minute. And that was in some contrast to how Republican candidates behaved 4 years ago. You remember there were a bunch of alternatives to Donald Trump. None of them would drop out. They kept splintering the anti-Trump vote. And guess who got nominated? Donald Trump. In this case, Pete Buttigieg and also Amy Klobuchar dropped out before Super Tuesday, endorsed Joe Biden. In Amy Klobuchar's case, helped him win her home state of Minnesota. So they get credit for supporting Joe Biden, for getting out at a time that was helpful to him. And of course, in both their cases, they supported Biden over Bernie Sanders, who they saw as just too liberal for the party. So he gets credit for that. You know, the other thing about Pete Buttigieg, think about this, he's 38 years old. He is 40 years younger than the 3 men who we think are going to be competing Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump for the presidency. He could be running for president 3 decades from now, and we wouldn't think he was too old for the job. So he's got a long path ahead of him to think about trying to learn from this campaign, build a better resume. For instance, say Joe Biden gets elected president. I think it is entirely likely that we would see Pete Buttigieg in the Biden cabinet. And that might be good for Biden. It would definitely be good for Pete Buttigieg.
I think we got 1 or 2 delegates from congressional districts, which I thank South Carolina for, and the people. But I said if I didn't see a path to winning, that I'd suspend my campaign.
Speaking of dropping out, we got multiple questions about what happens to the delegates committed to the candidates who drop out. Well, guess what? Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar and Tom Steyer have not actually dropped out. They have suspended their campaigns. Why do they suspend their campaigns? They suspend their campaigns so they keep control of the delegates they have already won. That means that the delegates that they've won, and really just a handful of delegates, but in the first states, in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina, they maintain control of them because their campaign isn't technically over, even though their campaign has really ended. So that means that their delegates are not reallocated to some other candidate. They're not reallocated to the people who are still really in the race, like Biden or Sanders. You get to the convention, though, and the convention delegates will vote for candidates who are actually nominated for president, which might well not include the candidates who have suspended their campaigns. At that point, the delegates are free to vote for whomever they want. The candidates who used to hold their allegiance can encourage them to vote for a particular candidate, for Sanders or for Biden or whoever, but they can't control it.
We are going to defeat Trump because we are putting together an unprecedented grassroots, multi-generational, multiracial movement.
Here's a question we got on Facebook for our Facebook group, Across the Aisle, Across the Nation. And Bernie Sanders would like to know the answer to that question because his support is, he's got such strength among younger voters. This is such a point of weakness for Joe Biden. Sanders was really hoping to bring out more younger voters. He didn't bring out more younger voters. His turnout was not greater than, in some cases not as big as, it was in 2016. Younger voters are hard to turn out historically. The candidates who can turn them out, like Barack Obama, are the exception, not the rule. You can draw your own conclusions about why younger voters don't bother to vote, while older voters do bother to vote. But I can tell you, you can see the impact every day in our government. Why is Social Security protected, sacrosanct, in a way that college student loans aren't? It's because younger people don't vote and older people do. Thanks so much for sending us your questions. We hope you'll send them again on our Facebook group, on YouTube, on Reddit, or just directly to us at youask@usatoday.com. I'm Susan Page. Thanks.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, check out these other videos from USA Today to stay up to date with all the latest news.